we've talked about how little we know compared to what's out there. Um, and there was my Rabbi Nissel shared a quote with me one time from Ramosha Shapiro that he asked somebody, "Do you know what it means to say that somebody's a Talmid Chacham?" And the person said, "Yes, it means he's a scholar, that he knows a lot of information." He says, "Do you know what it means to say that somebody's one of the Gedolei Hador?" And I think the guy said something like he knows a lot more, or, who's amongst the most or something. And Ramosha says, he's a person who knows that he doesn't know very much. One of the great ones of the generation. And then who is the greatest one of the generation? The Gadol Hador, the greatest one of the generation. He's the one who knows he doesn't know anything. And you can imagine how much there is that we don't know if you really take a moment or two compared to how much we do. And it's quite daunting. The Donald Rumsfeld quote I like to come back to: there's what we know, there's what we know we don't know, and there's what we don't know we don't know. So he was talking, I think, about the likelihood that there's a terrorist organization that has the capability of a dirty bomb or something like that out there. So there's what we know, and we have all that information. Then there's certain things we know we don't know about, let's say, Iran or certain things like that. And then there's the stuff we don't even know what we don't know. And then I think Michael Shermer, who was the editor of Skeptic Magazine, or publisher of it, editor of Skeptic Magazine, he added that there are some things that are unknowable. They are proven to be unknowable. That I remember hearing conversations about this, like on podcasts, etc., and knowing even while I was listening to it that I don't fully comprehend, that I don't know what they're talking about. But apparently, there are certain mathematical results or certain that suggest that there are certain things that can never be known. We certainly make that assertion about God's essence. We say that God's essence cannot be known. It's unknowable. We call it unknowable. So that would be in that category. Michael Shermer wouldn't include it in that category because he's the editor of Skeptic Magazine and is not a believer in God. But we who it's our life, our relationship with God. Um, so we assert that it is not possible to know God's essence. We can know perhaps things about God. We can make statements. We can assert things with certainty about God. He is one. I can say that, and I can say it with finality and certainty. Um, but I cannot know his essence. This comes up this week because the Torah portion is Chukas. By the way, it is my grandson Ashi's bar mitzvah this Shabbos. Aaron Shalom, the son of Avraham Yosef, who is our oldest grandson, and his Torah portion is Chukas. And the Chukas begins, Zot Chukat HaTorah. This is the Achok of the Torah. And it goes on to discuss the red heifer. The red heifer is the great symbol of chok. Chok, we are told, is a category of law. Their law can be divided in different categories depending on the purpose of your discussion. And one of the ways of dividing them is what we would call chok and mishpat and maybe edut. So chok is when we do that, when we distinguish between chok and mishpat, which both mean law, we're told that chok represents the category of those laws, those mitzvahs, for which we don't know the reason. That we're being asked to follow this because God told us to do it, but ultimately we don't know the reason. Whereas mishpat would be the category of things that we tend to understand the reason for. One of the distinctions would be, one of the ways of distinguishing them would be, if there were a group of us trying to come up with laws, would we come up with this law? Right. So the assumption is with mishpatim, these are the kind of laws you would come up. If it wasn't our group, it would be somebody else's group, but somebody's group would come up with a law like this because but chukim, you wouldn't have come up with it because it's not the kind of thing you would have thought to come up with. And so that, that might be a way to distinguish between them. I once read, did not hear this, I read Manis Friedman. He is actually was in Minneapolis just Sunday. I don't know why I've become this traveling person lately, but I feel like I'm doing a lot of traveling, and I'm going to be traveling next week. I want to say this now. I'm traveling next week, but only on Tuesday. I'm going to be here. I'm going to be here on Tuesday. But my son Shauli is coming also, and my sister. We have Ashi's bar mitzvah this Shabbos, and my sister is making a wedding in Toronto on Thursday, next Thursday. And so I'm driving with Shauli to Toronto, and then we're going from Toronto.
When are you leaving?
On Wednesday.
So, Rambam on Wednesday.
I that's what I'm assuming. But we are, and we may not have Rambam on Monday. Because we have to drive him down to St. Louis. Our Tuesday classes are meeting. This class is meeting on next Tuesday. That's the plan. Yeah. Okay. Anyways, so he lives in Minnesota, Romanus Friedman. For decades ago, he was one of these thinkers and speakers that was sort of known throughout the country. He's the head, I think, of a Lubavitch girls' school there or something, girls' high school. I forgot what in particular. He's Avraham Fried, the singer's brother, Manis Friedman. And he's a very thoughtful and interesting speaker. He wrote a book called Why Doesn't Anyone Blush Anymore? And that book, he got national attention. He was on a lot of talk shows and stuff during that time. Anyways, he wrote that about chok. He suggested that one of the ways to understand the distinction between chok and mishpat is for men, this works for men, is thinking about the difference between understanding another guy and understanding women. That notion, which is pretty much agreed upon, that men do not understand women, he suggested is chok. The relationship between man's thinking and a woman's thinking is our relationship with chok. It doesn't mean that it's nonsensical. It doesn't mean even that at some point there wouldn't be, a reason behind it. It just means it's possible that what it means is that it's just not available to our way of thinking. There is no Rabbi Michal Twersky. He should live long and in good health. From my rabbi and spiritual mentor and spiritual father, Rabbi Michal Twersky. He on the day of my wedding, he gave me like a little pep talk. And he told me, he said, I got married 40 years ago, and he was probably married about 70 years ago. So by that time, he was like close to 30 years married. And he said, he told me, he said, I did not understand women before I got married. And now that I've been married as long as I have, I still do not understand women. And especially, he said there's even areas where I'm considered by a lot of people to be one of the specialists, that like understanding people. He said, I'm considered like people think of me as somebody who understands people. And I'll come to a conclusion about somebody, and my wife will come to the opposite conclusion. Like I'll think this person is well-meaning and just needs help, and my wife will say, stay away from this person. This person is yeah, there's something there. You stay away from them. And then he said, and I will say to her, look, I've had a chance to speak to him. I think I know this kind of thing. And I'm saying, I don't think there's something to worry about. And she's going, no, you stay away from this person. And he said, she is always right. But I don't know how. He said, even though I've seen it in action, I've seen it work, but I do not know how. That was his pep talk to me on the day of my marriage 41 years ago. So
Good pep talk.
yeah. Yeah. So anyways, I thought that was, anyway, but we have this, so we acknowledge that we don't know very much. And that when it comes to God, his essence is unknowable. Right. The Rambam says, regarding the first statement of the Ten Commandments, I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt, out of a house of bondage. Anochi Hashem Elokecha, asher hotzeisicha me'eretz Mitzrayim, mibeis avodim. That is not just an opening statement for the 10 commandments, 10 statements, but it is in itself a mitzvah, and it is the mitzvah to know God. There is a mitzvah to know God. And what does it mean to know God? It means to have certainty, to have investigate, to apply our rational tools, and come to conviction, come to certainty about the existence of God and God. There are elements of God which he considers like the pillars of knowledge of God, that God is the creator, that he is the first being, that he is the cause of everything that came after, that he is one, that he is not physical. There's all these elements that are considered kind of pillars of belief. We call them the 13 principles of faith of the Rambam. So it's not just that you assert these, but that you assert them with conviction, that you've investigated and you've come to a conclusion that supports these ideas. And it just seems like, of all subjects, to say that there's a mitzvah to know God when we already know. He knows this. He knows how little we know. And he himself asserts that it's not possible to know God's essence. But then he says that it is a mitzvah to know God. So what do you say? What he means is to know what we can know about God, the stuff that's available to know about God. But why? why it sounds like Don Quixote. Is that how we pronounce it? Quixote, not Quixote. Um, this journey to knowing God, when it begins with an emphatic, there's no way to do it. And also just our humble sense of what we can know in general. And then we're on this like quixotic Western pronunciation journey to knowledge of God. Again, this is starting because of the notion of chok, and that there are a category of mitzvahs that we don't really know their reason, but we do them because God told us to. But yet somehow here we are expected to embark on this journey to know God. So what why does this matter? Why does it matter? I already am humbly acknowledging that I know nothing. So why does it matter so much if I know God? Like again, because I can't know his essence. And even the things I think I know I don't know them fully. I know like a tiny, tiny, tiny particle of anything, let alone any quality or character of God. I've shared with you, I had this conversation with Ramosha Shapiro, a blessed memory, that I once said to him, these 13 principles, these Yud Gimel Ikrim, these 13 essential ideas, some of these are unknowable, or at least to somebody like me. Like take God's oneness, understanding God's oneness. Even the Rambam himself, makes it clear that we're talking about a kind of oneness that you don't regularly experience, that I don't regularly experience. We're not talking about that's one clock, because that one clock still has many, many parts. We're talking about a kind of oneness where there's only one. You never could find more than one in that one. And, as he's talking about it, your brain is just at some point going, okay. And your brain's waving at the Rambam because at some point it's going to a place, and that this is the deepest of the deep. And that's not even going into the mystical notions of one. That's just the rational, philosophical notions of one that he's talking about. And then there's mystical. So I said to him, I don't know what that means. So why am I being blamed if I say uh, I don't I don't believe it? I can't know it. I can't, I don't know it. It's so unlikely that I'm going to know it. What does it mean that God is the first cause? I can say the words, but you're talking about that we can't imagine a circumstance where there's never been a cause before, or that he's the first being. That means he exists before time, before space, before time, space, and matter. He exists before time, space, and matter. Can you imagine a world without time, space, and matter? Uh, a Brief History of Time, the physicist who wrote A Brief History of Time. I know when I do this, if somebody's listening to this being recorded, because it happens to me too, if somebody's listening to this being recorded and I say something like that and they want to shout it out because they know the answer, and I'm just on this recording, they're just hearing me fumbling around because I've lost his name. But anyways, he's the hugely important physicist played by Eddie Redmayne in the movie.
Stephen Hawking.
Yeah, Stephen Hawking. That's it. So in Brief History of Time, he makes this point. We can't imagine. If you would ask, like, what was the universe like before the Big Bang? We have no
No.
basis. We have no context. We don't have the faculties to go there because it would require thinking about a place that there's no space, time, or matter, and we can't do that. And then he mentioned Augustine, that somebody once asked Augustine, what was God doing before he created the universe? And Augustine said he was creating hell for people who ask questions like yours. So yeah, but so yeah, so what does it mean? What does it mean? He's like the first being. There was nothing before him. I mean, we can't even know what that means, right? And so, but let's say that so how can it be? You're asking the average Jew, because this is something that applies to all of us. All of us are supposed to accept these 13 notions, not just accept them. He's saying it's a mitzvah to know them. But so why would somebody be punished if he says he doesn't believe it? The people who say they believe it don't even know what they believe. So why does it matter if this guy says he doesn't believe it? So he said you can't the thing here is nobody needs you to know this thing deeply. They just need you not to deny it. There and I did not understand that answer for many, many years. I did not understand that answer for many years. Again, his answer was he acknowledged it. He actually laughed when I asked this question because I said it's like somebody's holding a gun to my head and says I have to believe it, and then I go, okay, what do I have to believe? And then the person says, I can't tell you. He actually laughed at that and said, no, all that's being asked is that you don't assert that you don't believe it. Okay, I hear the words, but why? What is the depth of that? Why did he say that? So I will share the beginning of a thought. Um, which is that when I embark on a quest to know something in my quixotic journey to know God, let's say, I embark on this quest. Part of it is that I'm reaching beyond myself. And this can be a little bit scary because I don't know what's out there. So I have to reach beyond myself. And if I'm going to really learn, I have to be open to receive. I can't just be out there protecting myself. I can't just be out there just looking, like insist I'm just looking, I'm just looking. No, I have to be open to receiving when I'm out there, which means I'm vulnerable in this process. It's a and then this is the so you I'm reaching out in my exploration to know. I'm trying to know. I'm listening. In other words, I'm open to receive. And then I'm going to suggest that my goal is, what is my goal? To connect. I'm going to suggest for this little bit that I've been thinking about that the key is what we'll call connecting, bonding. There is a meaning, there's a word to know, which is lada'at, to know, lada'at. And da'at is one of the ways to speak about knowledge. We have other words for it, chokhmah, bina, da'at. We have other words. But when da'at is spoken of specifically, and especially when it is distinguished from chokhmah and bina, these are all words that have to do with knowing or knowledge. Da'at is characterized as a kind of knowing that is more like here. You experience it here. Right. The, you, obviously it's there, but I'm saying, but you experience it here. And there is a sense of connection or bonding with the subject of your knowledge. And that explains the usage of this word in the beginning of Bereshit in Genesis, where in one of the first chapters of Genesis, I don't know, it's chapter 3 or chapter 4, where it says, and Adam knew Chava, his wife. And it uses that word, ladat, to know. He knew Chava, his wife, and we translate that as he was intimate with her. They had intimacy. In other words, they bonded. They bonded in a way that they connect. Um, and it had previously said about this bonding, it said, and therefore a man should leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife and become one flesh. So that bonding is like you become one. And so I in my approach to this, I'm what I'm suggesting is that the this quest, this journey to know God is ultimately about connection, about attachment, about, in a sense, becoming unified with God. I'm looking for a kind of bonding. It's using my intellect. That is the vehicle that is active for this process. This is not simply an emotional process. This is not like two people falling in love. This is not that. This is it is very much driven and uh, about the intellect, but it's the use of the intellect for the purpose of this kind of a connection, which is uh, a kind of bonding sense with it. So, like for instance, if you had a lot of life experience with somebody and you've known them for a long time and they've always been trustworthy, and then somebody says to you, um, "Can I trust this guy?" And you say, "Yes, you can trust him." And he says, "Well, how do you know?" And you would say something like, I've known him for 45 years. I've been involved in 100 situations with him, and he's always been there and he's always been trustworthy. That's about as good as you can do it for him. But you've had life experience. This is not based on no evidence. And what you mean, where you are saying that from, you're saying that from here. You're not saying that from here. You're saying that from here. It's like a bond that you know this, like it's in your kishkas, this knowledge. It's in your kishkas that you know it. And there are things like that especially your area of expertise, whatever your particular area of expertise, you've been doing it for decades, and this is exactly what you do. And then somebody brings you a problem in exactly your wheelhouse, and they ask you, "Do you think you could do this?" And you say, "Yes, I know I can do this." Now, how do you know? And when you answer, it's going to be from here. I know. I know this in my kishkas. This is me. I know. So I'm suggesting that is the value of this project. The ultimate value of the project is not how much data you end up with. Because compared to what the data is that's out there, whatever data I have would not register in any system of measurement because it is so little compared to what is out there. So it doesn't matter what the subject is, let alone something about God. But because I am using that methodology, because I'm using that process, I make contact with it, I make a connection with it, and in some ways I can become one with God in a similar way that a husband and wife can become one. That again, through using my intellect, I'm according to the Rambam, you're using proofs. You're using logical proofs and all these kinds of things in order to know specific things about God. And you get to a point of a kind of certainty, clarity, certainty, conviction about it. You've achieved the end goal in this process. What is the value of it when we know that it's impossible? Because that goal is not impossible. To say I really know everything about God, that's for sure impossible. To say I know anything about God, I know everything about anything about God is impossible. I don't know everything about anything, let alone about God. So what would be the point then? The point would be that somehow in the process of exploring it, I become attached to it. And I would suggest that love is the final result of this. That just like love is, we call it love making. Love is the final result of the bonding of husband and wife. So in this case too, love is going to be the final result of this experience. It's going to be like the process you're going, this is not simply something that happens in an ivory tower that's spoken about by philosophers. That this is going to be something that's way deeper than that. Way, 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 way deeper than just data collected in your brain. This is a connection in such a way that you feel one and you feel love as the final product of the experience.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
can I ask you, how do you go about this quest when you're through mitzvah, through study, through
Well, the
what?
Rambam, I mean, he gives examples of in more Nevuchim, in the Guide for the Perplexed, he talks about actual, logical proofs. You're using your intellect as best you can with all the tools that you've gathered over time to probe and to understand, to measure, like whatever Aristotle, the methodology Aristotle applied to understanding an animal, or the method that a mathematician employs to explaining a theory, you know.
But I mean, through watching plants grow, maybe through. I'm
No,
just.
he said that. That's what he says about love. He says, how do you develop love of God? You contemplate nature and things like that. But it could be that when he says contemplate it, he does mean this. I don't know. I don't think so. I think it's more like you're in wonder, like the poet who's in wonder of the rose, like Arthur Conan Doyle's thing about the rose. And I wish I remembered the exact quote, but um, but sort of marveling at why there are roses and the beauty of them, the gift of them. But even though they don't seem to be necessary on some level, but we have them and the beauty of them. So it could be that it's there he doesn't really stress knowing it in the same way that the process as he talks about God. But I'm suggesting that ultimately they don't amount to much different. If somebody, like, again, if I would measure the knowledge, let's say you had somebody like the Rambam and you could measure the information that he has, the process that he's using, the results of having that information. If you would measure it compared to what is out there, it would be so minuscule. So why is this something that God wants us to do in a when it it's not, we're essentially being told it's not possible to do what I'm asking you to do. So that's why I'm suggesting that he's not asking us to know everything. He's just asking us to go on the journey, to go as far as our intellect will take us to apply it in his direction too, which is the opposite of what a lot of people would do with something like God. A lot of people would assume that it's the last place where my intellect belongs. This is an assumption I think a lot of people make. It's just faith. It's not. It's just don't start thinking about it. Nothing good is going to come out of thinking about God. I could hear people saying that. But he has the opposite approach. And to what end? What's the value? So it's this connection that comes of the process. This process, though, think about dating. I, when you think about dating for most people, when they're when there's asking the person on a date, and it's frightening. It's the first time you've ever done it. It's frightening, and it's frightening for a lot of people, even if they've done it before. But you're asking somebody on a date, and they very well may tell you they're not interested, and that's going to hurt. And you don't know unless somebody else told you she's been waiting for you to ask her on a date, just go ahead and ask her. But otherwise, you don't know. And there's so much you don't know in the beginning of a relationship. And there continues to be stuff we don't know all the way through the relationship. So relationships require this, but at the same time, we want to know. We have a thirst for knowledge. I want to know everything about you. The and 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 so this is this is this is that. This is that. Why do they even try to apply intellect to chok? Even chok. Even after we're told about chok that there's not an available reason for it, people are still, and I'm talking about the Rambam, and others will give, their best guess for why we're commanded to do this thing. Like, for instance, the Rambam says that shofar is a chok. Blowing shofar is a chok. He actually lists it as something in the category of chok. And yet, he also writes that blowing the shofar is like a wake-up call, right? So, and he has in Mor Nevuchim, he has a whole section on rationale for mitzvahs, and many of these mitzvahs are chukim, kashrus, and things like that. These are recognized chok, and yet he's giving rationales for them. Why? Why are people doing that in that area? Because there's a productive end result of doing this. And that is that bonding. Even on things like this, I think when they do it, they're trying to demonstrate that even applying our intellect to the things we're told you're not going to understand the reason pays off. And how does it pay off? I can't say I know the reason, but my attempt at knowing the reason, that reaching be outside of myself, making myself vulnerable, and also listening to the point where I'm just like a vessel waiting to receive. So I'm applying, I'm out there, but also in this condition of receiving and vulnerability, etc. In this direction, it is bond creating. It's da'at, la da'at, to know. It's bond creating. To move in that direction. And this would be true with all manner of things. There are people that I've heard people say they love math. They love math. I don't doubt them when they say it. There are people who will say that about a lot of people will say that about fields that they've really put a lot of intellectual effort into, that they feel love for it. And I think it's this thing. And that's the benefit of saying there's a mitzvah to know God and applying your intellect to it. Otherwise, it's a ridiculous thing. It's a joke. It's an absolute joke. What do you mean to know it? There's this. You essentially are telling me from the beginning that's not. It's not a possible task. So why are you sending me on this task? It's a joke. All right, that is my thought for this evening, and I look forward.
Wait, Rabbi. Sorry.
I look forward to Lois's question.
Yes, it's a statement, but I'm reading a book I came across through an interview with this woman. She's a professor of philosophy at University of Chicago, and she just came out with a book called Open Socrates, The Case for the Philosophical Life. And if anyone's looking for knowledge, boy, it's Socrates. I mean, that's his whole thing. She believes a lot of people.
He has an assumption of innate knowledge.
Yes.
Also, yeah.
That's true. And the quest is to bring it out.
Bring it out.
But and she says that a lot of people think that when he's having all these dialogues, he is bringing something out that he knows. But she says, no, he's not. He doesn't know anything. Through the discussion, he believes things can emerge.
I like that. Is it readable? Is it readable?
Yeah, it is.
It's called Open Socrates.
Open Socrates. Agnes Collard, Callard. She's Jewish.
Sounds fascinating. Sounds fascinating.
Yeah.
So I'm only because I don't know if he feels like there's a limit to what we can know.
Right.
I don't know a lot about Socrates, although I do love that Euthyphro dialogue.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but I'm not sure if he thinks that we have access to all knowledge innately or what. But that other point, which is that there is unknowable information, and essentially God is the unknowable information, and now you're telling me to know him. It seems like a ridiculous thing to ask. Okay. All right. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you very much.
All right. Be well.